Hey guys, welcome back. Actually, in this second half of the class, we're going to be talking about home politics of the Rajoy era. And actually, part of it you already know it because we already addressed Catalonia in the first half of the semester. And here, obviously, it was Rajoy who was president of the government during this time. And it was not obviously, I mean, this was not an issue that it was easy to deal with. However, he's been criticized for how he's handled it. You know that it was fall 2017, October 2017, the Catalan government called for a referendum. Obviously the Mariano Rajoy government started bringing all these measures to the Constitutional Court, and actually the Constitutional Court declared this referendum illegal. We've already mentioned this in class, I think. And the response by Mariano Rajoy with this referendum was actually deploy police and try to prevent people from voting that day, which actually resulted in a rather chaotic situation in which citizens were angry and actually, well, nowadays it's being discussed whether it will be having better to let people vote no matter what, and actually only that part of the people that are pro-independence will have voted whatsoever. However, by the end of the day, deploying the police was not the most effective policy in this case, because by the end of the day, the international image of Spain also suffered. After that, you know that, we mentioned in class that Article 155 of the Constitution was triggered. That meant that actually the government of Catalonia, the regional government of Catalonia, was suspended, and the central state took over certain aspects of the administration of the region. In order to, and how on earth do we have a picture of a boat there with some cartoon characters? Actually, it's because in order to enforce this suspension of the government and the takeover by the central state of the government of Catalonia, police forces were needed. So police officers came from all over Spain to Catalonia, and in order to host them, the government couldn't find anything better than cruises. And the police officers were staying in cruise ships, and this was one of them. And obviously you can see how ridiculous it looked that police forces were staying in that ship. And why were the police forces necessary during that time in Catalonia? As you know, I'm telling you, note that protests took place in Catalonia, so police was necessary to keep order in the region. Do you know that actually right now the situation is kind of de-escalated? We'll talk about that in the next week when we talk about the Pedro Sanchez government at the moment, and how the pro-independency parties are sustaining and are supporting the current government. But by the end of the day, the way Mariano Rajoy handled Catalonia was a little dialogue with the region, and it was the imposition of the constitution that is absolutely legitimate at that time and at any time. By the end of the day, is making people following the rules. What other home politics were interesting in Spain at that time that Mariano Rajoy government is going to be remembered for is Ley Mordaza. It's actually a law for security in the state, and actually what it did was increasing or creating new fines. And actually it was a response to a social situation in Spain. We've already talked about 15M, we've already talked about all these protests, and how, for example, the 15M also resulted in an anti-eviction movement, people trying to prevent evictions from happening. So this law, that actually if you translate it literally will be gag law, because of not allowing people to talk, this is how media, the nickname that it got from the media, it established new fines. For example, fines for resistance against authority between 600 and 30,000 euros. And actually these will be, for example, the case of trying to, how in an eviction, actually it's the police that goes to the house and evicts the people out of the house. If you are trying to resist the eviction, or you are trying, if you are in the middle of the way of the police in that case, you can be fined. And this is actually, that's why it was introduced, fines for climbing buildings on landmarks between 100 and 600 euros. So protests as well that were taking place into so they could be visualized by others, will take place in public, in buildings or landmarks. fines for taking pictures of the police, and actually this was very controversial, also between 600 and 30,000 euros. Particularly in demonstrations, people were filming, trying to prove what events were happening. So if taking picture of filming a police officer, you might get a fine. And last but not least, fines for non-communicated demonstrations, particularly in buildings that are where security is deemed necessary at a higher level. Here we're talking about in front of Congress or any government building. Demonstrations could go from between 30,000 to 600,000 euros. That it's absolutely shenanigans, so to say. So by the end of the day, we see how this law, through these fines, was limiting freedom of speech in a sense. Obviously, this is a hard balance always. Where does freedom of speech finish and where does the freedom to protest finish? But it was highly criticized. This law has already been repealed by the new government, so it didn't last that long, but it was very controversial, as I was saying. So guys, this is about it. I'll see you again next week. So have a nice weekend. Bye.